to Snape Chat, the voice of the Snapedom, the podcast where we discuss all things Snape, always. Join us as we dive into the world of the bravest man we ever knew in art, fanfic, meta, and more, obviously. This is Snapecentric with episode 23, where we earn our explicit rating by talking about Snape and sex. Join danpuff, Megs, jalapenoeyepopper, and myself as our discussion ranges from Snape as a virgin to Death Eater speculation to casual sex versus love and common smut tropes. As such, there are content warnings for discussion of sexual violence, noncon, dubcon, self-harm, depression, and kinks of various kinds, as well as an explicit description of a sexual act. If you wish to avoid the latter, skip from approximately 1 hour 28 minutes to about 1 hour 46 minutes of the show. This is a jumbo-sized episode at more than 2 hours in length. Enjoy the show. This is Snapecentric, and I'm here with Danny.
Hello.
Megs.
Hi.
And jalapenoeyepopper.
Howdy, y'all. You can call me Hal.
Yes. Okay, so today we're going there. Snape and sex. Wow, chicka, wow, wow.
Just what we've all been waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone there a little bit, but now it's a lot of bit.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, so should we start with not sex? The virgin question.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really yeah. I made
Good
this
place
note
to
on our
start.
outline because I thought it was such an interesting question to lead off for this discussion, because canonically we have no evidence of his sexuality.
So this is all conjecture, this entire show. So if you're looking for facts, try a different show.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, yeah, so my question was, did Snape die a virgin?
Well, he didn't die.
Well, yeah,
We've
that's the
already
first
been
thing.
over that.
I
I was gonna say, I
That was
hope
an
not.
episode.
Like,
Yeah, I
just want to give him a little intimacy. Like,
mhm. Yeah.
I will say a lot of people that I've talked to are like, there's no way anyone gets to their 30s a virgin. And I'm like, well,
yeah.
that's not quite
happens.
true. It's
That's
like,
when I come in the sex-averse ace, point of view. So there's one side of things that I could definitely headcanon Severus as asexual. That just he had his, strong feelings for Lily, may not have been even to the extent of, sexual, just being the person that gave him the most affection out of anyone that he'd interacted with. So obviously built a strong bond. Otherwise, demisexuality of needing that bond before being able to be intimate with someone. So I can see him, in the queer spectrum in that regard too.
yeah.
That's good.
I feel like my big thought with that is, I can see him like staying a virgin. I don't want to get into incel territory, but it's not that necessarily. Just like, it's not really like I'm staying a virgin for reasons. Just my life's insane.
Yeah,
and
he's too busy being brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
He was just focused on school, and then he was bullied and probably very unpopular, and then he gets into the war, and like I can see him not having time for that and not having time for like personal relationships. But I can also say I had this headcanon that like maybe he would want to like experience it and like go to sex workers for that. So I can kind of see it both ways of like being kind of clinical with it and like I want to have this experience. I have these urges. I really don't want to like get like close and personal with people, but there's a solution to that. I could just go pay for it, get it done once a month, whatever. Or he just decides it's not something I care about one way or the other, so I'm just not going to worry about it until he does meet someone who is worth the time and the intimacy involved in that. So
once a month, like, in his schedule, on the wall.
So on a similar note, there's a popular trope in a lot of fics where he is quite voluntarily celibate due to his strategic position in the war and how dangerous it would be to open up to somebody, anybody, and how that would make them vulnerable and him vulnerable. And there's a few different levels of selfishness and selflessness there. Like, I need to protect myself from having the ability of someone to leverage that against me, and also I don't want to be used against them. So there's a whole lot of potential for angst and self-loathing there that I see in a lot of fics.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love angst and self-loathing, so
Yeah.
perfect.
That's what Snape's all about, I think, is angst and self-loathing.
Yes.
Heck yeah.
Especially since his only experience of when he finally makes it known that he has feelings for Lily and wants Voldemort to spare her, obviously it doesn't go the way that it was promised to happen. So anything after that, obviously Severus was like, this, I can't do this. I wasn't even a part of her life anymore, and she died, sort of thing. Like, if I was directly involved with someone, they would be absolutely at risk. So I completely see that. Absolutely.
A fun corollary trope is also using celibacy or even impotence as a rumor to help avoid more distasteful activities of the Death Eaters, which kind of leads into that next subject of Death Eaters and sex. So we're good, like, taking it 0 to 100 here, right? From the origin question to Death Eaters and sex.
Yeah, it's, because it's a children's book series, there isn't going to be any canonical evidence of what Death Eaters get up to, but they're terrorists. And that's, such a common weapon for them.
The closest thing we get is at the World Cup, when they're like, have the woman, the Muggle woman in the air and flip her upside down. And, that's like, that's still assault in its own way. And that, that's as close as we get. But it's just like, oh, if they're doing that in public, what are they doing behind closed doors,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also, sex can be used for recruiting or retention of members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I've rarely seen that trope, so I've
seen it a few times. I've seen it a few times where it's like Lucius is like, here, let me seduce you, and now let me tell you about the Dark Lord.
Yes. Oh yeah, definitely some Lucius
that
Yep.
angle of it. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, Lucius is pretty much all about under the I don't know how to say it. If it's kind of sketchy, it's Lucius,
Yeah.
I definitely see him like in a lot of, it really doesn't matter on the pairing for the most part, but if like Severus is the central character and he's younger, like Marauders era, it's always Lucius who's like the one manipulating and grooming him to, to pull him into that. And he's always just so like slimy about it, like it's just, it just is what it is. So I believe that 100%.
Well, the one tiny bit of canonical evidence we have is Sirius making a comment about being Lucius's lapdog. And I think Fanon took that one line and ran with it.
Oh, yeah.
Even though I would certainly doubt the authenticity and motives of Sirius saying that and hearing that secondhand from him in particular.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is the one tiny bit we have that we go, okay, so that is the avenue of how Severus wound up connected to the Death Eaters.
And then I forget what fic it was from, but I remember in a fic it was talking about how Voldemort had tasted all of his new recruits.
Oh yeah, I read that one too.
I was like, oh, okay.
I absolutely have read at least one like that.
Okay.
Now that you mention it, I've seen more than one fic where it is in fact some kind of sex ritual that is your initiation or how you get your dark mark.
Yeah.
And also, now that I'm thinking of it, even I've used the trope where dark magic itself is something of a lustful draw. That it has this certain mysterious essence to it that draws you in and gives you this taste of power that is so similar to lust.
Yeah.
Because it's giving into the desires over like an emotional or moral point of view. It's just like, here, I can give you something that you will enjoy, or I will give you something that you can forget about everything else, or just the power structure of, you're now in my control, there's nothing you can do. And it's just, there's a lot of things that go into all of that.
It fits so nicely in the Harry Potter universe because we have things like the famous line about choosing what is right versus what is easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is easy and what feels good with no effort is then this dark magic.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Should I get a little deep and connected to the real world?
Let's do
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I have a note about sex violence in war. And I can preface this by saying I'm not exactly a peer-reviewed scholar on the subject, but I've been a political activist for women's rights and take a strong interest in strategy and game theory and how these are tactics used in war. So, historically speaking, violence and sex violence in war have been around forever. And for millennia, it was about property. As early as the 1st century BC, we have some writings from Cicero about how this is basically property damage and property theft when an opposing force comes in and does their, what we might call today, rape and pillage.
Mm-hmm.
And even the origin of the word rape and that phrase kind of comes from taking, and it's more about property than about the personhood. It wasn't until the 1600s that we started getting writings from influential enough people that those writings were preserved that suggest that there is even a difference between like military and civilian persons. So not just women, but women, children, innocents of all kinds being separate from the military force. This is a relatively new idea in human history. And even then, there were some notes, trying to establish these as war crimes. And even as early as the 20th century, or as late as the 20th century, it was still very difficult to prosecute. So in like World War I, at the end of World War I, there were some charges brought in an international court about rape as a war crime, and it didn't stick. Like, that's how late in the game we're talking that this is considered a war crime separate from all the others. And finally, in World War II, we got some movement on that. And that's also about the same time that we started to really understand the psychological impact and using sex violence as a method of terrorism and maybe even genocide in war. So I'm giving this as kind of a big overview of why this is a thing. And even today, the way we have been conditioned to think about war and violence in war and sex violence in war has this long history of misogyny and property rights over human rights. So seeing that the wizarding world, okay, that was the real world. Now we're back to the wizarding world. The wizarding world is so isolationist. Gosh, what year was the International Statute of Secrecy? Does anyone know?
1600s, was it?
1600s, right? So this is about the same time that we're even starting to see this distinction between civilians and military. And that's right when the wizarding world goes into isolation. And so the wizarding world is not progressing socially at the same rate the Muggle world is, in terms of seeing enemies as enemy combatants versus enemy nations that have civilians. So having that distinction is entirely lost on the wizarding world. So it makes a lot of sense that even as late as the 1990s, canonically, we might build on how our violent history is still very violent and very misogynist and looking at people as property and othering the Muggles entirely, rather than seeing, say, Muggle leaders and Muggle militaries as an enemy, that is the entire group of Muggles that is the enemy, or mudbloods, Muggleborns, excuse me. And this notion that there's a difference between civilians and military is something that sticks out in my mind a lot, and makes it totally believable to me that the Death Eaters would engage in sex violence against Muggles and Muggleborns.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that.
So yeah, there was my high level. If you really want to know more about that stuff, I would try to keep it super high level to avoid triggering topics that get too deep.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, this is a potentially very squicky subject. And
Yeah.
if you want more than that as a primer, the Wikipedia article on wartime sex violence is not bad as a starting point. It'll give you a little taste of what to get into if you need to research that for a fic. That might be a decent place to start, and see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
And we'll link that. So
Mhm.
now I don't remember how this came about, but the rumor of dark revels where
I may have brought this up initially in all the planning stuff, because that
You
is
did.
something that has been,
it's a good thing. Yeah.
it has been a trope for a long time. I remember first seeing it in 2001 in a fic called Pawn to Queen by Riley. I think you can only get it on the way back now. I'll find that link. I'll dig it out for us. But it featured an important scene where there was a party going on with the Death Eaters, and I think it was in the Malfoy dungeons, and there were some private rooms involved. And Lucius brings Severus to a private room, and there, naked on the bed, is Hermione Granger as some sort of gift, and he has to sex her to save her. That's one of my favorite tropes.
Yes. Yep.
And the whole idea, like the theme of it was called Pawn to Queen because she started as this pawn, and he's then training her in things like the art of war and strategy and how to come into her own power and understand her own power. So this is the earliest dark revel fic that I can remember, and there is a long history of the dark revel being a really good plot device for some hurt and comfort. So whether it's the victim is being hurt and Sev has to comfort and support them, or it's more like Sev just came back home from the revel, broken in body and spirit, and partner of choice is the only one at Hogwarts who finds him and can help him and heal his battered body and soul. This is so yeah, you can tell I've read a lot of those. They're probably one of my favorites.
I do see that come up a lot.
Yeah, I'm planning on having a Snape and Death Eater episode in the future, so we can really dig deep into that.
I will say that I've read a lot of stories like that, and I've definitely heard like rebels be mentioned in it, but I never really linked the two as like a dark revel is like a trope more or less type of thing. Like I never really thought about it that way. It was just like this concept I saw a lot of without really thinking that it had like its own name. So that was cool. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a dark revel story. Whether or not it's like called that by the author, I'm like, that's what that is.
That is a pretty common trope. Yeah. So
I love it a lot.
Yeah. Okay. How about sex versus intimacy versus love? I tend to think if he had sex, it was more transactional.
Yeah.
As in paying for it or
favors.
Right.
Or as a strategy for his espionage.
Yeah, to keep certain what's the word? Allies.
Yeah. So like with fellow Death Eaters, or if he needs like information, or if it's just I need a favor, or I can see him not seeing it as anything other than a like physical need that needs taking care of, or something he can trade for something else, as opposed to taking it as, because I can see him just not thinking he will ever find love and intimacy, or even being like scared of it in a sense. Like I don't want to get close to people in that way. So sex is sex, and it's never anything else, and it is something I can use. It is something I can take care of for my body, but it's never anything more than that.
Yeah.
Right.
Until he meets the right person.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
I would like to speculate that this is one of the reasons that we Snape fans are so in love with the marriage law trope.
Yes.
We have been since, again, the early 2000s. The very first formal marriage law challenge was WIKTT back in the day. I think it was 2002 or 2003.
Oh, wow.
And there was just a rash of marriage law fics because suddenly he was forced to be in this sexual relationship and he had to find some way to own it, and making it a little more transactional was definitely one of the common themes.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that the marriage law had such long
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
roots.
It's been around since the dawn of time, it feels like.
Yeah. Well, and forced pairing, forced bonding, corollary tropes have been around since ages. And I mean, early fiction, historic fiction has been a lot of that.
Especially in your enemies to lover ships.
Mm-hmm.
What else is going to bring them together? You have to make them.
Right. Force them.
Yeah.
You'll fall in love eventually. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. Just put them in the same room, let them kill each other for a little while, and then eventually it'll turn out okay.
Yeah.
And they're in bed, and then they're writing poetry about each
Yeah.
other.
Hey, Snape is
Yeah.
canonically a poet. I can totally
He
see that.
is.
Mhm.
100%.
And then there's casual sex, which I would define as maybe having the same partner but without emotions involved.
Your friends with benefits or a fuck buddy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Those are great for some plot what plot when you just got to scratch
Mhm.
that itch.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I can picture him being very, gosh, I wish I could remember who taught me the phrase emotionally constipated. But he's
I
not
love
letting
it.
those
I
emotions
love that
out.
one so much.
He's keeping it all bottled up, and all you get is this like unleashed passion in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
That is some fantastic stuff, and totally fits his character. I can also see him being like, if we want to go dark Snape, I know we love our light and
Oh, I love
full
every
rendered
shade of
Snape,
yeah.
but we also have
Every
like, the
shade of
darker
Snape.
tendencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So he could easily pull off casual sex in a variety of ways. He can brew polyjuice and just be someone else for the night.
Yeah.
He can legitimize. He's a master of mind magic, so he would, know exactly what a partner wants, fulfill that, get his own in return, and then maybe even mess with their mind to make it so they don't know it was him, or they don't know
Right.
what happened. And that's where it gets a little more dark.
Yes.
Which is very tasty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And see, I feel like I see like the casual hookups of like picking at people at bars more than having like a set person, unless there was just little options. But I just feel like for him that would be a little too close to comfort, having like a friends with benefits situation. I feel like he'd be a little more wary of that, of having the same person, especially someone he's already close to in some way. But I can definitely see being like, I can go pick up a stranger, I can go to a brothel, I can do XYZ. But I feel like he would want to put some distance there. For me personally, that's what I see, until he's like, I could just see him being very like worried about falling in love again and being too close, especially during the war and stuff. So I can definitely just see him being a little more pushing people away, but like once he's there, he's there. But I can see him just being too worried about that to really have anything regular. But I can definitely see like the hookups. I can definitely see like some polyjuice action,
Mm-hmm.
some obliviation if need be.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Marshmallow McGonagall, who I interviewed a few shows back, has as one of her common tropes is that Snape heals Tonks. And in the course of the healing, they start to get, kind of going on a sexual thing.
Nice.
So eventually it turns into, more emotional and
Mhm.
such. But it's, I don't know.
Snape the healer and Snape the curse breaker are totally on my hurt and comfort radar.
Mhm.
Yes,
Okay.
That's
yeah.
good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Okay. Well, can he fall in love again and still, be true to the memory of Lily? Oh my God.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes,
Of course.
absolutely.
Believe in love.
Yes.
I mean, when it comes to the dope Patronus, I'm like team homage rather than team amour. So it's not that I have anything against Snilly. It's just I find it a little boring. I mean, there, I said it. I would rather explore all these other options. I'll ship Snape with literally anyone. Bring it on. And so yeah, I think it's possible he never was in love. And he doesn't know what love is. And he can't, in many ways, because of his role, afford to have that kind of vulnerability. So can he fall in love? Yes. Has he? I don't know. And what can we do to explore his vulnerability?
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm at. Is I feel like with Lily it was just a very like intense friendship, because like let's not underestimate the power of platonic love.
Exactly.
Like, it's not
for
a lesser
sure.
form of love. So like I can see where he thought he was in love with Lily, or maybe never was. Like he always knew they were just friends. Like I can see he's never been in love and getting to experience it for the first time later in life.
And not seeing it until it's too late. Then love smacks him across the face.
Yeah.
I'm not in love. I've never been in love. I can't fall in love. No, not for me. No, sir. Get it away from me. Oh, no.
This is one of the reasons that another one of my favorite tropes is the fake relationship.
Yes.
Because he will be the very adamant, this is business, this is transactional.
Yes, yeah.
And then he catches feels and it all just hits the fan.
Yep.
100%.
Mm-hmm. I wish I could think of the word, but I think with Lily, it's more about redemption than love. At that point, he's just dedicated to righting the wrong, of,
and like regret and guilt and
right.
There's a line in one of my recent fics where he's talking to his new love interest and tells her, for her, I wanted to die, but for you, I want to live.
I love that. Okay, I see that. I've seen that a couple times and I freaking love that for Snape. It's so great. I love it. Because that's so true.
Oh,
yeah.
I love it too. Oh my God.
I love it.
Yes.
And I think we want Snape to find love just because of how hard his childhood was, how hard school was for him, going through the war. I mean, you go and see like from start to finish to the day he dies, quote unquote. It's like he hasn't had a chance to live. So being able to find that with someone gives us the comfort as readers too, and those that love his character, like he can finally live post-war, if it's like an AU of him living afterwards or even during war stuff. And that's what gives it, their slow burns are so convincing because of his issues with actually committing to and understanding and accepting love. So, and we also love that. We're like, we want to be along for the journey, even though we're like, Severus, wake up. But it's like he's got so many things to work through that he never wanted to and never thought he had to. But then he has to, and we're here for it.
He also has, in a lot of fics, this fear of commitment that is very understandable canonically, because the times he has committed to something, he wound up like the branded property of a madman. So that is something that's going to make him shut down potential commitment.
Yeah, and even with Dumbledore, going to Dumbledore and saying, I'll do anything if you save her, and then he doesn't. So that's another like step of, feeling a betrayal from another powerful man. So it's just, it's
what happened? All of the trust issues, I think.
I know, like that's
every single one.
So many trust issues, so much trauma, so many issues.
I feel like he deserves to be loved, and then I feel like he's such a big capacity to love that when he did find the right person, oh my God, they would be blown away by the amount of like pure, intense, beautiful love he had to give.
So this kind of leads nicely into the idea of power dynamics in his sexual relationships. Because we're talking about power dynamics here. We're talking about who has control, who has leverage. So this is one of my favorite topics about Snape and sex, because we can do literally anything with it. You get your own flavor of any kink, BDSM, power dynamic, whatever you want. So a lot of folks have him as a hard dom.
Yeah.
It's very, very natural to write because of his buttoned up, repressed, in control nature. And also this idea that he has all this trauma and needs to reclaim his power.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of great base to make him a dom on any scale of the spectrum from soft to hard dom. But there's also the subby side, and I'm very fond of looking at how he can learn to trust other people,
right,
and allow someone else to be in control with the trust that they will not harm him.
Right.
And then of course switchiness is always an option. But in some ways dom, some ways sub, and specifically in different situations. Like I very much had see that he's subby in the bedroom, that at the end of the hard day of being in tight control and buttoning up all his emotions behind occupancy, he really has to let go and have someone to trust to be with him and not be leveraging him.
Yeah. That's what I love about this, like the switch dynamic of usually I see him starting in that dom position because it's natural, because he's comfortable. And then eventually once those feelings and trust, come to play, then it's like you get the swap and he realizes, this is actually where I want to be, like after all of this. And I love that for him and for them and whoever's involved.
See, I kind of like the idea of like he goes towards doming for like he wants to be in control, but it's also like a perception kind of thing, but it's not actually what he wants deep down. And so like he actually does have this like leaning towards being submissive, but then feeling all kinds of shame and fear about that because of all that he's been through. Right. And so when he does find that person he can trust and like can like for the first time actually be able to be who he is and have what he wants and be able to trust that he's okay and not have to worry about, I'm worried about how this person sees me, or I'm worried they're going to do XYZ, because he can finally just be who he really is and just have that thing that like soothes him. And
now I'm going to come on the opposite side of things and the example of a hurt, no comfort situation where Severus feels like he's safe and gives into something, and then that person takes advantage of that. And it's a very dark...
I love it though.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, I love every situation that this man could be put in. And that's,
I like that as like the opening hook of a story. And then we kind of give him a break by the end.
And then maybe it's figuring out like, oh, I did that before. How can I try that again when I was betrayed? Like, it's all betrayal, just so much betrayal over and over and over again. That poor man. We love just putting him through the ringer. Like we just but the thing is, the goal in the end is hopefully to give him love, but we want him to suffer for it.
You must suffer first greatly. Exactly.
Oh man. Oh,
but then there's like the idea of like, oh, I dealt with all this suffering and now I have this break, and just like the idea that like it was all worth it if this is where he ended up.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Oh God, I'm not crying. You're crying.
I'm just sitting over here in my series.
I also love a good tragedy, but generally in shorter stories. Like I can't handle a slow burn epic that then is a tragedy, but give me that one shot, peer into the life of the tortured Death Eater, and then canonically kill him off. Like that happens. I'll read fics. I've written fics like that. Very, very much a gut punch of emotion that then sets me up right to go read that slow burn epic with all the fluff in it.
Yeah.
And this is one of my favorite things about Snape in particular, is because of the flexibility of the character, we get that he is the master spy. He is the deep cover double agent. We don't know like truly anything about his personal tastes and preferences because he has been under the thumb of these war generals for so long. And so we can kind of do whatever, and if variety is your spice of life, which it is for me,
Yeah.
then we can get a taste of all of it.
Yeah.
I love hate sex too. Like
Yeah.
when it comes to snack, like Sirius and Severus, like it's always just gonna be like when we can get fluff out of it, like great. Like it's another two, the potentially broken, complicated, messed up dudes that them coming together is, it's another one of those toxic relationships that we just love. But I love that dynamic too. Anytime that Sev can be with someone like even James Potter, where it's like that enemies to lovers or just enemies, but we're aware that it's fueled by lust, like we're coming back to the lust thing, and they play off of that, but they know that emotions are never going to be involved because they hate each other too much, but they're like, but the sex is really good. So it's fine.
I do
just
love
don't stay and cuddle. Like just get out. Like
okay, now leave.
I also am fond of Sev being very cold and analytical and using his partner. And I think Snack lends itself really well to that.
Yes.
He can, and it lends itself so well. That was the ship I chose when I wrote one of those.
Perfect.
Yeah, that notion that, well, in my fic, it's mapping the dungeons, where he is using Sirius to test a potion, and it's a sexual aid potion, and he's like, well, we gotta do some human trials, let's do it. And Sirius is getting something out of it too. He got into the situation by exploring a little too deep in the dungeons for the Marauders map. So they're both kind of getting their own thing out of it and not really thinking about what the other is getting out of it. And that makes it this cold, calculating, delicious, hard sex.
Nice.
You'll have to link us to that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you wanted some excerpts read as well, that one is it's like a 3,000 word one shot. I could read as much of it as you want.
Well, what do y'all think?
Sure. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Now or after the discussion?
Maybe after the discussion.
Yeah, I think that might be better.
Before we go to the Rex. So, a common trope is the size of Snape's ego.
Nice euphemism.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know why this is making me blush of all things.
So before we do the physical attribute, the ego is actually important. I mean, This is the man who coined himself the Half-Blood Prince. So that is another aspect that kind of lends itself toward that hard dom, that experienced Snape who kind of knows what he wants and is going to get it. So that's an interesting basis in canon for that particular level of dynamic. And then having a big dick does help.
Dick energy.
It's also fun to picture that, like, I picture a very underfed, scrawny, tall guy, and then all of a sudden it's just like, whoa, like, what is that doing under? I mean, that's why he wears robes all the time, because he's just like, trousers are not gonna be like
like, it makes me think of a fic called Reconciling Lily's Eyes, and in that Harry is like, it just doesn't look like it fits his body. It
right, I know.
Yeah, attached to the rest of it.
Yeah.
Skinny and pale and bony, but it's so big it looks incorrect.
Exactly. Like, is that where all your nutrition is going?
Yes.
It also reminds me of Desert Seas, An Hour of Snape. And Hermione thinks she's doing Draco in Polyjuice, and she opens his trousers and goes, "Oh my god, it's huge. Did you know it was so huge?" And Snape's brain is like, did I know my own dick? Like, what?
Yeah. Well, it keeps us coming back for more.
So I do appreciate the fics that acknowledge that he might not have a circus penis, that he might in fact have just a normal schlong, average pecker, typical wood, and that excuse me, I'm gonna get them all out. The nod to just being an ordinary guy, kind of gets me. Like, he is just a man under those robes, and he's a typical dude with a typical body that we can still desire.
I will say, I often, just because I've been in fandom for so long and I've read so much stuff, there was a time where I was like, I'm tired of everyone having the biggest penis on planet Earth. I'm tired of it. But I can't help but be a little fond of Snape being a little on the bigger side. I'm like, this man deserves it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But also, like, if he was like more average or on the smaller side, like that could also go into the reason why being intimate with someone, like there's, you know, that just being so insecure and not willing to show that, but then having that person that's just like, you're perfect the way you are, like it's like it doesn't matter, like it's so, you know, it's just
I will say I do like seeing like a small dick in a fig, but
oh, for sure, absolutely.
For Snape, in my head, in my heart, he's got a big one. I will take any penis size on any other character, but for Snape, I have that preference. In fact, I would like for him to be bigger and his partner to be like tiny. That's what I want. Are we getting too personal on here?
No, this is what we're talking about. So.
Yeah, I do like whether it's one or the other with like Snary, for sure. It's like either Harry is like, you know, got it going on, or it's Severus.
You know what? Specifically, I will accept small dick Sev in that situation.
Yes, right, exactly. That's kind of Danny's over here pondering, like, did I just go backwards in this opinion?
You bring my OTP into it. I had to pause to think.
Exactly. I know.
All right. Man. On this topic, I have a small excerpt to read.
Nice.
It's going to be very shameless and self-promo. My Liz fic, my epic Girl Like That, because they do talk about the size of his dick. And she says, I am not a size queen, and I don't picture you as someone to brag about your own prick, even though you'd be slightly in the right to do so. But in fact, I've had bigger, so for real, don't do that unless you want to risk me laughing at you. His fists clenched at his sides. What the fuck kind of reassurance is that? It's the truth, Severus, she smiled. And all you have to do is refrain from asking me mid-stroke if I like taking such a big dick. You can talk dirty all you like about it being yours, fitting me perfectly, and feel free to get creative. I do like dirty talk, and I like your cock, but I understand now you're sensitive to the possibility that I'm making fun of you, and I'm suggesting that it would be a little dangerous to bring my focus to the size of your dick and thus elicit a flippant response from yours truly. He glared, but he flexed his hands, brought them up around her, and said, I am getting used to it. You are more flippant than not. That's true, she said brightly.
Nice.
So there's my little snippet of them being a little bit snarky with each other about the sizes.
I love that. That was great.
He then proceeds to say that, like, this is really specific. Have you laughed at someone like that before? And yeah.
Oh
no. Anyway.
Also, since we're talking about the physical side, he often is very scarred from all his trauma, you know, starting with when he was a kid.
I always like mentioning the scars personally. I did for Snareathon, I wrote a fic called Contempt, and a big thing I was going for was just, I have a very big love of like flawed characters, like personally, physically. I'm like, everyone's flawed. It's fine. I'm leaning into it. And so the first time he and Harry are like hooking up, and Harry's like looking at him and like pointing out all of these like the physical flaws and looks like all these scars and just how, you know, his body's different, obviously showing like all he's been through and like other physical imperfections, like his chest is concave, his belly is a little soft, hair and like discolored skin and just like all these like imperfect things, and then he's like, give me.
Yeah, exactly.
He was like trying so hard to be like, no, just look at him, like get it out of your system. He's like, oh no, I have to have him now.
It's really interesting to distinguish between like the scars someone else has given him versus just the imperfections of the body. And how a typical person will have some imperfections, and there's something of a metaphor to be had there about what that physical representation means on the inside. And I think that's one of the reasons we like the scarred Severus so much, is we like to see him as somebody who has had a lot of bad things happen to him rather than he has done a lot of bad things. So I think there may be a connection there with our favorite scarred Severus.
Yes.
Okay. Snape's bedroom skills.
Yeah.
We'll be doing.
He's just such like a person who's like in search of knowledge, and like I feel like he could, like earlier talking about like the going to sex workers and stuff, how he's just like, this is a skill. I like being skilled.
Right.
I'm going to keep doing this and like get better at it, as opposed to just like, I'm having sex like quote unquote naturally. Like I'm not having relationships. I'm not just doing it for fun. Like I am going in, I am fulfilling these needs, and I am learning things. So go that route of like he spends his younger years having more transactional type sex, and then the time he gets with his like soulmate, he's just like very good.
Yeah, he's got the potions text, and then he also has like a sex ed text that he has his own notes in there.
Yes.
Like the step-by-step of like how to perform oral sex, but then he's just like, no, that's just no. Like writing all of these like
corrections.
Notes. Yeah, corrections as far as like, no.
Where's the process?
And I can picture him being an inventor as well. Like he invents potions, and if he's interested in sex, he's going to invent sex potions.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
It's going to be a thing.
My favorite thing is when he brews his own lube.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what's that? It's a noob.
That's pretty much the premise of the fic I mentioned, mapping the dungeons, that we might read later. He also might have enhancement potions. I've seen fics where he has stamina potions,
right?
Where he has potions that he applies to himself, but for her pleasure. Whether he pulses or gets bigger or becomes more rid or whatever.
Ooh la la.
Yeah.
Pulsing.
I've also seen all sorts of different, what you might consider more like recreational drugs, where it puts you in an altered mental state, or it enhances arousal in some way. Or one of the ones I put in one of my fics is doing a topical elixir of euphoria and how that might feel. There's all sorts of interesting ways to expand on the potions. I like potions technobabble in my fics as well. Whether I'm reading or writing them, I'm trying to make that tag a thing. So if you browse my fics, you'll see a bunch have the tag potions technobabble, because
I dig it.
Do it.
I wish I could do it more, but I just feel stupid, and I'm like, it's magic. Just make something up, Danny.
Yeah. You can always just make it up. And the fandom wiki has a ton of interesting stuff for the canonical uses of potions and ingredients, and even some of the history of it. There's an article in the fandom wiki about the history of love potions as a genre of potions. And so doing that, and also drawing from real world stuff. In one of the fics I've got that I did recently, there was a lot of stuff about memory magic. So I was actually looking at peer-reviewed research on natural herbs and what their relationship is with memory, like stuff like ginkgo and things that we know as herbal remedies, and building off those, and like, so make a magical ginkgo that actually makes it, more potent or whatever. So So anyway, trying to branch out like that is something I feel like Severus would do, and so I'm not quite as brilliant as him, but I like the idea that I can look up something and then add a magical component to it, and it'll fit.
Yeah, and I kind of like, you know, his scholarly side and being able to bring that out and having that techno babble in there, so.
I'm super attracted to his big brain.
That's right.
But speaking of like the potions and things, it made me think of my fic, The Best Kept Secrets, where the whole thing starts, there's like a male pregnancy in it, which was like a potions mishap. But there's a scene specifically where Harry and Snape hook up, and it's very like, they're angry, it's quick, and just they're mad, or like Snape's mad at Harry. And then by the time they like make up and are feeling better, Severus like summons like a stamina type potion and feeds it to, like, he drinks it and then feeds it to Harry. He's like, we're going again. Like, adding the kitchen wasn't good enough. Now that we're good, we got to keep going all night. So, he was like a potions master, so like that was what he was doing for a living. So it was all stuff he had brewed. He's just summoning stuff around the house. Like, come on, let's go.
Oh man,
I just love that part. And I think that might have been like the first and only time I was like using a potion to like keep things going. And it was the whole point of like, we're older, we're physically not going to get it up again anytime soon, but I have a potion for that because I am not through with you. Which I love to see.
Another skill of his, besides potions, that I think would be superb in the bedroom, but also very dangerous, is legilimency.
Oh, yes. Legilimency sex. Nah. Chef kiss.
Yes.
Even if it's just like I love it with the teacher-student trope, like if they're in the classroom and then he pushes like, you know, like scenes into the mind of said, you know, student to like test their resolve sort of thing. And I love that too. Like as far as like that tease aspect in public is absolutely great.
Speaking of that, my friend Pina Naponi wrote for Snareathon a trick of the mind, and like the whole prompt for that was like them using legilimency in public to like tease each other.
Nice.
So it's this whole long thing of them like before they're even actually like physically trying to get together. It was just like he finds out that Harry's been attracted to him, and then they just start using it against each other to like get each other all hot and bothered while in the meeting.
I love it. The UST, so good. I didn't read that
really,
one.
Really good. Big on the UST for sure. Always.
So the first time that I wrote a scene with legilimency in sex, I got a comment on that chapter that said that was frightening. That thinking, like, what are you going to hear in that mind? And is it going to be soul crushing when you realize that your partner is a little uncomfortable about a thing, or they're thinking about something else entirely? It reminds me of that. There's a classic Star Trek episode where Data gets into a relationship, and he's an android. So he, like, in theory has no feelings, and he also thinks at a mile a minute. So when the love interest kisses him and then steps back and asks, what were you thinking? He talks about how like he was thinking about his cat and the cat's diet and what he has to do on deck next time and all these other things. And it's this crushing moment.
Right.
So that's what I meant when I said legilimency might be a little bit dangerous to employ in the bedroom, because we already know that Sev may have some insecurities.
Right.
Some emotional issues, trust issues, and when he takes a peek in somebody's head while he's doing them, that could be a potentially dangerous moment. But it could also be a very validating moment, especially if they're having a good time and the partner is thinking about him and how much they're enjoying it. And I kind of would go like he would be a little careful about pre-legilimizing somebody to know their desires before they get down. And that happens in more than one of my fics, because they actually use it as some fantasy pornography or just, I think it's in the fic Drowning, in Secrets and Lies, when I have him with Poppy. There's a rare pair for you. And so the first chapter is all her discovery of what makes Snape so compelling. And then she starts fantasizing about him all the time. And when they talk at the high table and she's thinking about how she's going to go down to her room and rub one out after they talk, he like chokes on his tea and is like, okay, come with me because we're gonna go do this. So yeah, legitimacy. He's gonna know you better than you know yourself, and that is hot.
He could use that to spy as well, huh? Oh, I'll get close to you so I can get into your mind.
Yeah, that can connect to like the transactional sex, like using it to get some, because then they lower their inhibitions. He can probably slip undetected into someone's mind and pull information. So yeah, manipulative, Severus also is very enticing, and I love that. Like it's, so good.
That kind of leads like nicely into this idea that he has skills for spying that would be just as good in the bedroom. Yes, he can use legitimacy. He can just generally read the room. Like, I imagine most people are not that hard to read to him by that point. Like, by the point we see him in the series, that he doesn't even need to read their minds. He can just tell based on body language and what their actions are saying versus what their words are saying. And so this notion that he can read the room, that's a really useful bedroom skill. That fits right in. Are there any other traits that make him a good spy that would also make him a better lover? This was a question I thought about that I didn't really have a good answer. Maybe also the subtlety, because he employs subtlety in just about every aspect. He describes potions as subtle art, and being able to look at nuance like that, especially in the bedroom and with our bodies. Our bodies are so weird. One action in a certain context could be super hot and in another context be totally wrong. And it seems like he'd be the kind of person who would understand that context and all those details, his attention to detail, which we see in like the potions text being so fully annotated, really lends itself to that.
I think probably one aspect is the fact that it goes into like him knowing how to handle people, like how to behave, how to act, what to say. So it could also connect a little bit to like role playing, like he'd be able to create whatever type of perfect person that the other person might be into in that moment, because it's part of him. He could be just a really great actor. So like going into some more like alternative roles and things that he hadn't done versus becoming someone for a spy situation, like he becomes someone in a more, sexy way. So
yeah, I do like some fun role playing.
I have a number of moments in some of my fics where they flip that student teacher dynamic.
Yes,
that role play. Because man, I love inverting tropes. I love a good actual student teacher as much as the next person, but
yes.
Trying to invert that power dynamic. Yeah, definitely more than one time my partners for Snape will say, "Oh, we should put you in my school tie." Yes.
Obviously, I'm really into it because I'm running Fuck the Faculty Fest. So obviously, I hope for all the Snaries, Hermione, you name it. So it's probably still going on depending on when this, gets posted, because it's open posting through November 1st. So so we'll have to.
Yeah. I'm not going to declare my commitment entirely right now, but I've also been thinking about going the other way with the generational age gap and doing like another Snoppy or a Snilch or something that direction. Because I like all the age gaps.
Yes.
And like the only triad fic I ever did was Poppy and Sev and Hermione, so that's like age gaps for everyone. And seeing those power dynamics is interesting too. Like there is a lot of fic with Snape with one of his students, and not nearly as much of him being the student.
I do love the idea of Snape with Slughorn, just because it's like him wanting to learn from him, and it's also another like maybe transactional or manipulative thing of like knowing that Slughorn's this dirty old man that's like willing to, and then he's like, oh, I'll take you under my wing and all this stuff, and it's all so that he can learn from him and become better than him, sort of thing. So
And that I kind of like Snelch for similar reasons because
yes.
he's a dirty old man, but it's
Mhm.
like, Snape was so like unpopular in school, and then the teachers all had like their biases favoring like the Marauders. So like he was just really unappreciated. So I like the idea of like Filch being like on the sidelines, like actually being like, this kid's really smart, but I also relate to him because people like look down on me, and sort of like relating in that sense, but there's still obviously like he's older and he
Right.
is Hogwarts staff, so you kind of have this whole like someone can't appreciate Snape in that way, and then Snape is just like, no one ever pays attention to me, and oh, someone does desire me, and
Mhm.
I'm a teenager, of course I want to have sex, so
Mhm.
that's just really fun for me.
Mhm.
See, Snape absolutely could be having sex at school. Like that's just
Yeah,
he absolutely could have been
Filch
open
or
up
Slughorn.
a Slughorn. There's so many people listening to this probably like cringing and screaming right now, but that's okay.
But like imagine this. I'm just having ideas.
Nice.
So he first hooks up with Filch because it's like, oh, this person's paying attention to me.
Yeah.
And then he sets his sights on Slughorn because he has things he wants to accomplish.
Right.
So he's like, Slughorn is all about like a good time.
Mhm.
I want information and status, so I'm gonna go after him. And then just works his way up the ladder as a Death Eater, and then he becomes a professor, and then that's when he and Harry get together.
Exactly. Obviously, because he's like, oh, obviously that student-teacher dynamic was awesome, so I might as well.
I could also picture Slughorn's side of it being like using Sev as a buffer between himself and the Malfoys, because Slughorn doesn't
Oh.
particularly approve of the Death Eaters,
Right.
but
Yeah.
he wants to have that professional and social network, so he could use somebody as a buffer there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
smart.
Well, Slughorn always has a reason why he makes a connection with anyone. So he's just as much invested in, like, I mean, he probably saw Severus for whatever reasons as someone that actually, like, you could be, going somewhere. Because even with like Tom Riddle, he's like, oh my gosh, you're so brilliant. You must be a pureblood. But then he's like, actually, I'm a half-blood, sir. And it's just like, oh, like, so him finding that in another half-blood could be not surprising. So Slughorn.
Yay.
Slughorn tangent.
And yeah, I guess Minerva's also a fairly common
Mm-hmm.
ship, I think.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, as really good friends. Like, I love them as like best friends just because of their rivalry with Quidditch and all those things of just she doesn't take any of his shit and he just lets her and pretends to ignore it and not be bothered by it. And I just love the idea of them having tea at the end of the day and just complaining about everything that went on during the day and students and things. And I just think it's so cute. But them as a couple, I could absolutely see too. I've never read it, but I do love that idea too.
I think I read one really good Mentors to Lovers that I was like, oh, they could be lovers, because previously they were like my bro TP.
Yeah.
But they are just the, head bitches at the table gossiping about everything.
Oh, yes, exactly. Exactly.
And then, yeah, I will see if I can find that. I don't know if I can. I don't save all the fics I read. I'm a bad reader. So we're almost at the end of this outline. We just have the big old smut category.
Smut.
My favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So let me start by saying I will read literally anything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot squick me. Well, you can, but I like to be squicked. Like, that's my kink. So
Try and shock me. Just try it.
So yeah, like there's so much good smut. It's so good. And like every kink you could ask for. And if it doesn't exist, it will soon. And
Yes.
especially if you tell me about it. Because
Right, I know.
I will be like, oh, how could I get that in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love everything from him having that like loving first time that you never thought he would get to the most traumatic non-con situation that could possibly happen. he's definitely a comfort character. Him and Draco can be done with however anyone wants. Like, please just do things to them. That's all I ask.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I started kind of searching for PWP on AO3, and what I found was it's pretty much what you like.
So one thing that happens on AO3, because of how tags work, you can basically do two kinds of searches. You can do an inclusive or an exclusive, or both, I guess. I mean, you can filter in and out at the same time. And what I've learned about smut is that you want to have some idea what you're looking for so that you can search those tags. Because if you try to do exclusive searches on smut, you're still going to get crazy amounts of all the things you didn't want. So when the plot with plot tag is not very helpful, except in the sense that it's going to help you filter down the longer fics that are still plot with plot. Because obviously you can still write 100,000 words and have no plot.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it kind of depends more on like what do you want? Do you want and especially when it comes to, if you're trying to get a more broad filter, starting with those power dynamics we talked about is a good one. Like if you want Dom Snape, or if you want something more like a gentle femdom, or so there's different domination dynamics, that those are a good place to start for more broad strokes in your searches. And then of course, if you do have a preferred kink, just drop it in there and see what comes up, because it's probably something.
Yeah.
See, when I'm looking for smut, I'm usually looking for like a specific kink or dynamic. It's never just show me porn. It's like, show me this specific.
Oh yeah. Like this is this is the flavor. I am in search of this.
Yeah.
I need a dark rebel.
Oh man. And like I still probably forever will never forget and want to. Your Danny's fic obscene, the like Omegaverse one is just, that's all I can say is straight up, it is obscene. It is so graphic and so sloppy, and it's absolutely wonderful for people who love Omegaverse and just want Harry completely just ravishing super Sev in heat and just making a mess like semi-public is just absolutely wonderful.
That was fun. I loved writing that one. It gave me so much trouble, but the finished piece, I was like, yes, this is everything I've ever wanted.
It's so, oh my gosh, so good. I love that. Another way for him to be like forced into a relationship is obviously like alpha and omega, situation stuff. So I love that too. I love Omegaverse, which obviously has like questionable consent issues and all that stuff, which is one of the reasons why I like it so much. So.
Give me that.
I was surprised by how many people like that one.
Well, yeah, there's PWP, which is mostly one shots, I think.
Yeah, mostly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then there's also long fics where the sex takes place in the context of a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. For me, I kind of like that. Well, I like them both, but I love it when, you've really gotten invested in the characters and then they're having,
Yeah.
I definitely like when it's like, it might be slow in the beginning, but then it trickles in and it's like, it happens more than once, versus a lot of long fic will be like, here is the moment in the last chapter where we finally give you smut. And I'm just like, oh my God, I've been waiting so long. Like, even if it's something in the beginning that's like, oh, it was an oopsie, like hookup, and then, time goes by, or like, I'm like, give me a little bit of something like over the course of this thing. But I love the plot too. So, but
it's a classic romance formula to have that slow burn and then your like culmination at the end, a climax in multiple ways.
Yes.
And in terms of plot, I think I have a good rec for this. And it's also a rec for Virgin Snape, Killing Time by Larry Opie. Larry Opie is famous in in Snape Hermione for Second Life. That's consistently like a top favorite on people's favorites list. But I prefer Killing Time. It's a post-war. It's entirely POV Sev. There's this great scene in chapter 6 where they just make out. And that's the extent of it. And it's very slowly building up until that point when they do the deed.
I mean, I'm good with that. I just need some sort of
yeah. So it's not like a plot heavy story. It's very slice of life, even post-war, but it's across like 11 chapters before you get to the climax, if you will. And so that's a pretty good rec for if you like that sort of like, it feels a little plot to me, because there's not a lot of plot, but it is very much a like self-discovery kind of thing where he's learning to live with himself and everyone else after the war. Similarly, one of my favorites is The Sensual World by Teddy Radiator. And it's another post-war, it's got that spoils of war trope going on, in the sense that all the Death Eaters have to be accounted for and like in custody. And so Hermione gets custody of Snape, and he's a brat about it, and they develop this sub dynamic. And it's in first person Hermione, which I think it's one of the best examples of first person POV that I can come up with, because it is that journey of self-discovery as she learns to dominate him. But because that's, that thin plot of he's in her custody, that it feels very plot along the way, until you realize that there is something very profound going on internally to these characters. That's also, on my list of recs for when you want some gentle femdom. That's another trope for me. I'll click it every time.
Yeah, we'll have another episode called 50 Shades of Snape, and we can explore BDSM.
I already had to move half of my recs over because I was like, oh, that's for another episode.
Yeah.
I was like, I have an awful lot of like power dynamic type things in here.
I think there's a lot out there. Is that I don't know if it's been since 50 Shades of Grey came out that kink is kind of more pervasive, or at least people are thinking about it, reading about it, writing about it.
Well, in the romance genre, there's always been a lot of power dynamics and dubcon, because it makes for drama. Like, a healthy relationship on equal footing is kind of boring. That's not why people buy romance novels.
Yeah.
So we need that level of drama. So I think it's pretty natural that you look at your rec list and you go, oh, there's power dynamics in all of it.
Yeah.
Because that makes it more interesting. It gives a conflict in the relationship itself, regardless of any external factors. And so that makes it super popular.
Mm-hmm.
But if we want to go to external factors, I think we have a list of tropes here.
Yeah.
Like, one of my favorites, fuck or die.
Yes.
Yes. Sometimes it's very literal. Like, it's magic. So there's curses, there's potions, there's things where if you don't have sex right now, you are going to die. From magic made me do it. That's a corollary trope of fuck or die. And so that's a really great, another plot device. Marriage law, we've already talked a little about that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, another external force, and all sorts of possible reactions to when you're being forced into a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the external ones on that list. Then it gets a little fuzzy. Like, discipline is both internal and external in many ways, because in an education system, there is rules, there's procedures. So, student breaks the rules, you give them a detention. That's not really internal to your relationship. That is in the school system and school culture. But then what happens during that detention?
Yes.
Can go any which way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Sexy times.
Yes. Spank me, daddy. I've been so naughty.
Oh, BDSM club is another common trope which we will explore in another show, but there's some very good fics with that. Sex god Snape.
I wrote that one.
Was it? Okay.
I have a love-hate with this trope because obviously I want him to have good sex, but I think it goes a little bit along the lines of the big dick stuff too, that he is often given these traits that we may or may not believe, depending on the context and the partner. And Sex God Snape is it's one of those tropes that makes for a good plot and good smut, but it can be a little distracting from the story sometimes. So balancing that is hard.
Yeah, I feel like I want there to be like a reason to it for me to enjoy it. If it's like because he's had so much sex as a Death Eater, or because he was practicing with sex workers, like give it to me that way, where he has a lot of experience for XYZ reasons that make sense to his character. At that point, when he hooks up with someone and they're like, "Oh my god," I'm like, okay, you know what? Fair. He earned that. It makes sense. Yeah. I like
it. You earned your badge. Here's your crown.
It's when he's like super suave that I start to question it.
If you really want a shortcut, go the legitimacy route. Like, there is basis in canon for him to take shortcuts and to improve things, and to have some creativity about improving things. So, yeah.
Just make it make sense and I'll like it.
Yes.
And then there is dead dove, do not eat.
I know Danny and I are like doing our dance. Like,
yes, please.
We
bring
are
it
hungry.
To me. We want that dove.
Yes. I will. Yeah, exactly.
For the uninitiated, because there might be uninitiated listeners in Dead Dove. The Dead Dove comes from another fandom where there's a scene where there's literally a bag in the fridge with the label "Dead Dove, do not eat." And when the character opens the bag, he looks in, sees the dead dove, and goes, "I don't know what I expected." So Dead Dove initially meant that it is what it says on the tin. Like, read the tags, I mean it, and there is squicky content ahead potentially if those tags apply to you. And it has evolved a little bit into, you should just expect some of those darker topics, whether it's tagged or not. And I have a really hot take on Dead Dove. Here it comes. I think it's a fad that can't die soon enough, because in theory it's redundant because we have a tagging system. And if we hold hands for people who don't read the tags, then we're just encouraging a problem. And in practice, I have discovered when I did put the Dead Dove tag on my fics that it only attracted hate comments.
Oh, wow.
People search out the Dead Dove tag specifically to troll it. So here's a little advice if any listeners are struggling with this, who are initiated in Dead Dove and are wondering, why are my fics always getting so much hate? Try taking that tag off. It's redundant and it might be attracting those haters.
Yeah, I actually recently added that tag to something that I didn't think needed it, because I tagged it so thoroughly.
Yeah.
It was kink, but it was all like consensual stuff. There was like C&C, which is consensual non-consent, but I was like, I tagged everything. Why is everyone in my comments so up in arms? Everything was tagged. I think what it is that fic specifically is just written in a very intense way that it like upsets people. And I can't tell you the number of times I have added warnings like, I'm serious, I mean it, this is intense, read with caution. And the last time I got a bad comment, I deleted it, and then I just added Dead Dove. I was like, I don't even think this is a Dead Dove fic, but apparently it needed the tag.
Yeah, for me it's less a tag and more just like a theme of fic. Like, I like the overarching like things that fall under Dead Dove. There's a lot of it that I enjoy. So it's kind of like the plot tag. Like, you're going and there doesn't give you very much. And I'm looking for a specific thing that might fall under that, that realm. So I like that I can put a name to something like that it's like, hey, this is an overarching theme for darker, squicky themes that, some people read, write, whatever. But yeah, as far as a tag, like, I completely understand with what, it's an easy way to troll people for sure. And if anyone is out there that writes this sort of thing, my number one recommendation is to not engage. Like, delete comments, do not engage. You're only giving them the time of day and they want a response from you. Like, it's just, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If they went through and they read everything regardless of warnings, like, that's on them for that it upset them. I was like, no one made you read this. Like, so, and I don't care that you don't like it. So yeah, it's just, it can be really hard to not want to defend yourself, but really it's like, you don't need to defend yourself to someone that is never going to respect you or is worth your time. So that's a big thing when it comes to that sort of stuff.
And I'm willing to accept that as a caveat to my hot take. I know other people actually use the dead dove tag to search for fics they do want to read. And that seems to be a little bit fandom dependent too. So that has been an interesting one, that depending on your fandom, depending on your ships, you may have wildly different results of using the dead dove tag. So your mileage may vary.
Yeah, there we go.
To me, it's like it's going to be a little bit disturbing, or a lot. And I might hate myself for reading it, but I'll read it anyway.
Yep. At the end, like, wow, I did that thing and I liked it. Now I want more of it. Like,
what's wrong with me?
And I think to anyone who doesn't like dead dove, that's fine. You don't have to like, but you also don't have to be mean to people. Like, there's something wrong with it.
Exactly.
It's
like
fiction.
anything.
It's fine. Just don't read it. And if you do read it, that's your own fault. Don't comment.
I had an interesting discussion once with somebody who was training to be a therapist, and they talked about different coping mechanisms for triggers. And their opinion was pretty solidly on the fanfic is one of the safest ways to engage in potentially triggering content, because you can always just stop. Like, there is nothing about that situation that is holding you to it, that this can be a healthy way to try to approach things. And that avoidance is long-term possibly degrading to your mental health, that you are not dealing with your trauma. And so it's a little sad to me, actually, when people get very up in arms about this content is triggering. I'm like, but this is one of the safest ways to approach it. So, I mean, it's okay if you don't and you can't, that's fine. Just click away. That's the healthy thing to do, is just, there's an X button right there. Click it.
Just because it's not good for you doesn't mean it's not a valid thing for someone else to deal with their own problems, or just enjoying it because they enjoy it. Like, it has nothing to do with you. It's not a personal attack. Right. You can leave the situation at will. No one's forcing it down your throat. But everyone has their own stuff, and it's okay to enjoy what you enjoy, and it's okay that other people don't enjoy what you enjoy.
And some people use fic to process trauma. And I think in particular, Snape fans have a really great avenue to do that, because he has experienced so much trauma in his life.
Yes.
And he is also something of a blank slate. Like I mentioned before, he is this deep cover spy, so we can attribute just about anything to him. So if we're using him as some kind of intermediary between us and our trauma, there's a lot of ways we can make that work for us. So we have all this potential to explore really dark topics and get all of it out. And in particular, dead dove topics are kind of controversial in the fandom, but everybody has slightly different reasons for wanting to read it, and they're all valid. And also, they not wanting to read it is valid.
Yeah.
Right.
But in terms of dead dove that we have read, I mean, this is a common trope, right? So I think the obvious one is all of the power dynamics stuff, because he is in a position of power over students, because the Dark Lord and Dumbledore are in a position of power over him, because of his specific skills that, like legitimacy, that can go very dark very quickly. What else for dead dove tropes?
I mean, I love everything to do with Severus and the Death Eaters. Kind of like we talked about before, be that initiation or having to, participate in unsavory acts to prove his loyalty. So I feel like that's a big part of it, is there's, that's that blank slate aspect of he, we like going off of what is it like when they're talking about saving Draco's soul, and like, Snape's like, so you don't care about my soul, right? And Dumbledore's like, oh, like, I'm not so naive as to think that your, soul is untainted or whatever. And so it's just, there's so many things that he could have done or have had done to him for the sake of being a spy, having to remain, or feeling like he didn't have a way out or something like that. So things that, dark magic, dubcon, noncon, stuff like that. Like it just, I love that. I just do.
+1 to everything.
There's also a lot of potential body horror because of the influence of the dark mark on his very person.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's also, a ton of possible kinks out there that even if we don't have any basis in canon for them, they're fun to explore with a character who is dark and can potentially handle, there's relative traumas involved.
Right.
One that I might not even consider dead dove on the surface that I found myself reading more and more fics about is feederism and other stuff with food kinks. And that can get a little bit into that body horror.
Yeah.
Because of how that changes your body. So that's some interesting stuff that I've been delving into lately.
And if you think about how that can come into play with magic, different potions, spells, and it being used as like punishment, things like that.
Yep. And the borderline with like eating disorders. And then again, we're back into like trauma and mental health aspects.
And definitely some dark, relatable content to me that even I've written in the past is Severus utilizing, so content warning, self-harm, depression, using part of the reason why Sectum Sempra was developed was for self-harm. So part of him going through school and depression was some of those, like we talked about scars earlier, like some of those scars were self-inflicted scars through, depression, trauma, and things like that. So when a character can actually go through, it's like we talked about processing traumas, like that's a thing a lot of us went through in high school and early, like middle school and stuff like that. And it's like, it's a real thing. And to have a character experience and go through and understand that is very, it's dark, it's disturbing, but also comforting in that of like, that sort of thing. So that's one thing that I don't know that I've seen outside of me having written it. But yeah, I made for the first Reg Fest. So it was a Severus / Regulus fic. And where Regulus, it's mainly the point of view, and he discovers that Severus has been hurting himself and the reasons behind it. And sorry, I'm even getting choked up talking about it. But yeah, so it's just, that's another, that's kind of a self-reflection of some of the things that I write and why, like that falls into that. Didn't mean to damper everything down.
Just over here making notes for my own fix. Sorry.
No, yeah. No, yeah, that was part of it. Was like it was a slowly developing. Like he knew how to use it depending on the intent. Like any magic, like the intent of Harry when he used it, he was gonna get the Cruciatus curse like on him. He was immediately in defense mode versus just casting a charm to cause a little bit of pain or whatever. So there's different levels that could be used with Sectum Sempra aside from, obviously you figured out like, yeah, use this on your enemies. Like when you mean it, like it'll really hurt somebody. But yeah.
Oh, there's an artist I can't think of, but I wish I could think of their name. They portrayed him learning how to do it and basically cutting open his arm and then not being able to stop the bleeding. Until he figured out
like a counter charm or
the Vulnera. Yeah. Okay. Well, you got some fic for us, right, Hal?
Oh gosh, I'm first. Okay.
Read something for us. Well,
I'll do my reading and then we'll do it. Huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Got it. All right. Let me pull up the fic. Where to go? get my windows arranged. Should have done this earlier. Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, so Mapping the Dungeons is a snack fic, Sirius Black and Severus Snape. Explicit. POV is Sirius Black. During the Marauders era, they're like 7th years at Hogwarts. Tags include smut, dubcon, anal sex, sex for secrets, sex potion, legitimacy, sneaking around, the Marauders map, who is using whom, a dominant Snape, possibly canon compliant. I threw the canon compliant tag on there. I'm going to go for it. I think it sits canon adjacent. It's a one-shot, and it was inspired by art, so there's art to go with this, which I'll describe at the end. The summary for Mapping the Dungeons is, during his 7th year, Sirius has an encounter in the dungeons that inspires him to hatch a plan for a more complete Marauders map. With a good excuse to avoid examining his own motivations, he doesn't even think to ask himself what Snape is really getting out of it. Being a Marauder had a lot of perks. Fierce loyal friends was just the tip of the iceberg. Wormtail the Acolyte, Prongs the old blood brother, Mooney was the peacekeeper, and Padfoot was the sleaze. Everyone knew it. He knew it himself. In a few years, no one would have any doubts that Sirius Black sold out the Potters to Voldemort. At the moment, though, he was on a mission to gain information for the greatest Marauder secret of all, the map. The price of this information was his body. Sex. Great sex. Surprisingly glorious, delicious sex. With, of all people, Snape. It started a few months ago when Snape cornered him in a part of the castle the Marauders somehow missed. It was in the dungeons, of course, the Slytherin's domain. He should have known better, but he'd been chasing tail. There was this tasty 4th-year brunette who kept eyeing him at the Quidditch pitch. If only he'd known that Snape had some dirt on this girl and used her to get back at him. The Whomping Willow incident had been more than a year ago, and Snape had bided his time, waiting for the right moment. Thus, the first time was pure humiliation, and Sirius found himself in one of the abandoned dungeon classrooms, disarmed, bent over, and tied to a desk. If Snape had simply buggered him, that would have been one thing, but this boy was becoming a master of cruelty. He made Sirius want to be buggered, beg for it. Sirius could have escaped by transforming, but he didn't want to reveal that skill if he didn't have to, and from the very first touch, he felt like a puppy in need of attention. With only his hands, Snape teased Sirius until he cried, and used these tears in some lubricant potion that made him see stars as the head of Snape's cock slid across his prostate over and over and over. Brilliant.
And over. Ooh, I got chills.
Afterward, Sirius lay in his dorm, unable to sleep for his sore bottom and racing thoughts. It occurred to him that he would need all his wit and charm to out-Slytherin Snape. So he schemed. He wanted the more complete Marauders map before they finished this final year in school. The dungeons were all that remained. He didn't tell Snape, of course, but he did loiter where he knew Snape would be, and so far had 4 new and interesting secret hidey holes to add to the map. Tonight he was going again. Fuck, this was a bad idea. First reason, it was a secret. Hadn't told a soul. Lied, in fact, to the other Marauders about how he found these new places to add to the map. Second reason, it was Snape. They were still at each other's throats during the day, more, in fact, and more vicious than ever. Third reason, it was distracting. He wasn't quite as brilliant, and the NEWTs were coming. Revision, in fact, should have been his priority. But gods above and below, that boy could make his body sing with barely a touch, and the greasy crybaby could brew a fucking potion. The more he thought about it, the more he realized Snape hadn't been weeping in public ever since his near-death experience. So Sirius ceased calling him Snivellus. After shedding a few tears himself, it just didn't seem very sporting. Of course, the way Snape tied him up wasn't exactly sporting either. Tonight, Sirius went deeper into the dungeons than he ever had before. He had to duck behind a suit of armor to avoid the Bloody Baron, and this put him on edge. He wanted to be found, but it was a very specific predator he was baiting. The Marauders learned long ago that Slughorn didn't seem to care what happened in his dungeons, so Sirius knew which nights he was on duty and made a point of being there, hoping for another run-in with Snape. He was just about to give up when he found himself disarmed and shoved through a hidden door for the 5th time. Yes! Candles flared to life. A soft golden glow illuminated the dingy room, several pieces of low furniture draped with dust covers, the fireplace blocked with an iron gate, and one picture window filmed with grime. The 2 doors on the far wall hinted at more, and Sirius figured they were in unused living quarters. A wand point dug into his back. "Through there," Snape hissed, and Sirius made his feet move, one step at a time, wishing for more contact than the business end of a wand. The wait was worth it, though. The bedroom was everything the sitting room was not. Every nook and cranny was clean and dust-free. The enormous bed was covered with fresh linens. The window was spelled for diffused sunlight, even now late at night. There was a hint of pink in that light, like a soft sunset after a rainy day cleared out. And when Sirius turned around, he was struck by the way this made Snape's skin look alive and healthy rather than deathly pale. It made him look warm, despite the perpetual cold glare. Sirius could feel his jaw going slack, and he snapped it up. He wasn't supposed to find Snape attractive, just useful. Snape was already removing his own robes, and it took only a slight sneer for Sirius to get to work doing the same. He stripped himself, as he always did after that first time. He suspected even waving a wand to vanish the clothes would be far too personal for Snape, too much of a service in this twisted little power game. In fact, Snape normally kept on his clothes, at least until Sirius was bent over and unable to look. Then Sirius wouldn't see Snape at all until he was finished, fully composed, and came back around to look him in the eyes, as if to gloat before releasing him and quietly slipping away. Now, he could see that Snape's underpants had an upgrade since the last time he had a chance to notice. Black silk like his own. He narrowed his eyes, wondering at the custom tailoring of Snape's shirt as each button was undone. Sirius flicked his eyes to the growing pile of clothes on the floor and then back to Snape, who was tossing aside the last garment and raising one eyebrow at Sirius's delay. He hastily finished, and then met Snape's eyes again, wondering who would have paid for the improved wardrobe. The subtle elegance of it smacked of pure-blood old money rather than the poor son of a muggle Sirius knew him to be. That raised eyebrow changed direction, narrowing as his lips turned down to a deep frown, and Snape spat. "I have a new patron, and he wishes me to finish testing this potion." Sirius was a bit rattled. Had Snape known exactly what he was thinking? Snape produced a vial, the same glass and stopper and crystal-clear lubricant they'd used 4 times already. Sirius trembled. He suspected he'd be reduced to tears again, but he hadn't known he was being used at least as coldly as he tried to tell himself he was using Snape. Already blinking away a fresh batch of those salty drops, Sirius turned and leaned over the bed, stretching his arms ready for the ropes. He heard Snape hiss, "Bloody idiot," and then come up behind him and press against his backside. Sirius felt one hand creep around his waist, run his fingers through his pubic hair, and then firmly grip his swelling cock. He gasped and made fists in the sheets, back arching to push his bum against Snape's growing hardness. Snape slowly stroked him to a full erection as he spoke. "The first trials are a success, but you should know any potion with a person's secretions can vary wildly. The other trials were yours. This one is mine." It took Sirius a minute to understand what Snape had said, and in the space of that minute, Snape twisted him around and shoved him on the bed. Sirius sprawled on his back, hands at his sides, and knees bent high, shivering as he looked up at the ceiling. Snape was using him to invent a new potion, a potion that required inducing tears to make it, and a good deep dicking to test it. That made enough sense, in the way that sometimes you have to accept how magic is not always unicorn tails and levitating feathers. Snape using his own tears for another trial might have even made sense, just like he said, for a more thorough testing. But this feeling of admiration welling up inside Sirius did not make any sense. He was somehow proud of the greasy git. Snape crawled up onto the bed as well, and Sirius swallowed hard, unable to tear his eyes away now that he was finally getting a proper look at that cock, bewitched at the visible swelling and darkening. Without a word, Snape uncorked the vial and poured it into his left palm. Entranced, Sirius could only watch as Snape gazed at his own hand, studying his reaction with steady, dark eyes. The only betrayal of his feelings was a slight parting of his lips as his hardening penis lifted higher and higher. Sirius was painfully hard now himself. Finally, Snape shifted his eyes to Sirius, narrowing them slightly. Caught staring, Sirius felt the heat in his cheeks, but he couldn't look away. After a few seconds of eye contact, Snape rolled in annoyance and threw a leg over Sirius, straddling his stomach. He reached back and grasped Sirius with the lubricated hand, and Sirius gasped, balls tightening and blood rushing into his ears. "Do contain yourself," Snape drawled. "Not a chance," Sirius replied, reaching up to bury one hand in Snape's hair, thumb trailing along his jaw. Snape glared but did not let go, and Sirius ran his hand down Snape's neck into his shoulder, gripping hard. With his other hand, Sirius crept along the sheets till he hit Snape's knee and slid up his thigh. With his free hand, Snape swatted him, and Sirius retreated, resting his curious fingers at the back of Snape's knee. Face impassive, Snape seemed to incline to allow this for how he had to brace one hand on Sirius's toned chest for what came next. Snape tilted his hips and pressed the tip of Sirius's erection against his tight bum, sliding that slick organ around his hole. This also pressed his balls to Sirius's stomach. Ah, he gasped, overwhelmed by all the skin he'd never before had a chance to touch. He almost missed Snape's slight that mirrored his own as Snape sank down. Watching Snape's face was a lesson in frustration. Sirius wanted to hit him, to break through that stony facade, but he knew if he fought back, he'd be tied up again. He couldn't risk that. Now that he got his hands on Snape's lean, hard body, he wasn't letting go. Feeling Snape's insides was a lesson in control. The cold, hard surface of him gave way to a hot, silky grip on Sirius's cock, and he gasped again as Snape took his time, shifting his angle and depth to get it just right. Snape's impossibly dark eyes fluttered closed, and Sirius couldn't hold back any longer, lifting his hips to drive a little deeper. Snape growled with a depth that promised imminent development of a downright sinful voice, and he opened his eyes with a glare. He leaned down, and Sirius shivered with anticipation as Snape slipped his hand from Sirius's chest up his shoulder and to brace on the bed, and brought the other hand to his neck. Sirius didn't need to be tied up to feel pinned. He was at Snape's mercy, and he wanted to be. He wanted him. Snape's eyes rolled up, breaking contact again, and Sirius couldn't tell if it was an expression of pleasure or annoyance. Sirius felt like fire, itching for more contact, more movement, more. He gripped harder on Snape's shoulder, trying to pull him down. His stomach did a flip when he realized he wanted a kiss. But Snape didn't allow it, squeezing Sirius at the throat until he stilled completely. Sirius tilted his chin up, an instinct to open the airway, and Snape's grip loosened. Opening his mouth for a deeper breath, Sirius let his jaw hang open as he panted. Snape used his thumb to stroke the vulnerable flesh and then came to rest just under Sirius's chin. Tilting his own chin up and away, Snape let out one ragged breath. Then he moved his hips, slowly tilting back and forth, and Sirius groaned at the tight friction. Snape glared again and hissed, "Don't you fucking dare come before me." Sirius whimpered. Sure, he would explode if Snape kept talking. He hadn't said much before, simply focusing as he worked over Sirius's body with his hands. Did he know that his voice could melt steel, even as it made Sirius that much harder? Panting, Sirius pulled him a little closer between each exhaled breath. Then, "You better come soon." Picking up the pace, Snape switched to a more rocking motion, and Sirius gasped a bit with each loud thud of Snape's cock coming down against his stomach, at the same time his own cock was engulfed by the furnace of a man. The firm strokes of that ass on his shaft lit up every nerve ending of his body, and his pulse fluttered against the fingers at his neck. Sirius slowly slid his arm further around Snape's shoulders, and his other hand slowly up his thigh. Finally, Snape gave a clue that he might be enjoying himself instead of performing some necessary evil, and the tiny shutters of wiry muscles under his hands made Sirius tremble with need. He looked up to Snape's face, but maybe wished he hadn't. Snape's eyes were unfocused, not in lust, but in deep thought. His mouth was parted, baring his teeth in a scowl. His hair fell down in waves, but not close enough to brush against him. Even so, Snape sped up his movements, grimaced some expression of completion, pelvic floor clenching around Sirius and making him shout, "Oh!" As Snape spurted hot cum over Sirius's stomach and chest, Sirius closed his eyes, bit his lip to keep from shouting again, flexed his hips and came as well, pushing harder into Snape's tight ass and holding on for dear life. The endorphins crested, started to fall, and Sirius cried out in overstimulated pain as Snape wrenched himself away and landed heavily on the bed next to him. As he bucked his hips one last time, he could hear Snape cast a mumbled charm, presumably to clean up, and then tilted his head to see what Snape would do next. Laying on the bed, panting, he watched Snape roll over the edge onto his feet and begin putting his high-quality new clothes back on. Snape's face was a blank mask again, his appearance fully put together and his bearing totally in control. No one would have been able to tell that he just rode another man to a blinding orgasm. And he slipped his robes over his shoulders, and Snape said, "Do not come back to the dungeons at night." Sirius sucked in a deep, steadying breath, and then frowned and sat up, reaching for his underpants. Trying to play it cool, he simply asked, "Why not?" "I won't be waiting." "Well, what makes you think—" "Don't be a moron, Black." Snape pinched the bridge of his nose, and Sirius had the mad urge to drop a kiss on the tip of that excessive beak. He gave himself a mental shake so he could pay attention when Snape continued, "The others leave you alone because they know I wanted my revenge. They know I've had it now, at least twice, so it's no longer my turn. The potion tests are done, and I have no reason to insist otherwise." Gutted, Sirius didn't know what to be most upset about, the insult to his intelligence, the bizarre Slytherin honor code, the threat of unspecified others who wanted a turn to attack him. None of that was as brutal as the knowledge that Snape's interest was protecting him, and that interest was about to dry up as quickly as the cum matting his chest hair. Shuddering and choking back a sob, Sirius whispered, "Maybe you could..." Snape scowled. "Shut up, Black. I got what I wanted. There's nothing I wish to do for you, even if I could." "You have to," Sirius said quickly, racking his brain for all the contingencies he'd thought of between their first and second meetings, and then promptly forgetting in favor of thinking with his dick. Pinning Sirius with an icy glare, Snape twisted a palm up in a gesture of impatient expectation. Sirius gulped, unwilling to look too closely at why he felt like crying this time. It was too hard to think while naked and desperate. What kinds of threats did Sirius still have in his back pocket? He lowered his voice and glared as he said, "You keep meeting me in secret or I'll go public." "Watch your bums." Snivellus finally cried into one of his potions, and it made him gay as a parade and randy as a puffskein. "My gossip network is so good, I could plant 4 different clues with 4 different people, and then I wouldn't even have to say it myself. The timing..." Snape flicked his wand and silenced him with a nonverbal hex. In mute outrage, Sirius moved to stand, but the ropes came next, pulling his wrists out away from his sides and forcing him to kneel on the bed. Staring at his wand as he twirled it in his long fingers, Snape asked, a little too calmly, "Do you know what legitimacy is?" No way, he couldn't do that, could he? Sirius thought back to how he'd wondered about Snape knowing exactly what was on his mind earlier tonight. His jaw dropped again, not in pleasure, but in surprised horror. He wanted to know, but literally could not ask how much practice Snape had with that skill. Mind magic was dangerous, a dangerous violation of another person, even more alarming than the physical attacks. Physically, Sirius understood his body's responses to the games he and Snape were playing. The mental and emotional responses were much more difficult and frightening to consider. Snape continued, "If I were you, I'd be very careful about what sorts of secrets you wish to spread as rumor. After so many opportunities to read you during your totally unguarded post-orgasmic bliss, I have found more than enough to make you regret anything other than total silence." Snape more securely gripped his wand and sneered, "Do not prove you are an idiot by thinking any rumors about my dedication to inventing new potions would hurt me." Then Snape cast a finite to undo the bindings and returned Sirius's wand to him with a perfect parabolic toss. He quietly slipped away while Sirius fumbled the catch. Sitting alone and staring at the rumpled bed, Sirius already felt full of regret. For several minutes, he didn't even bother with the counterhex that would allow him to speak again, as he was very sure he could never tell a soul what happened here. With no way to know exactly what Snape had seen of Sirius's sleazy antics, he could not even risk putting this room on the Marauders' map. The end.
Ooh, buddy.
Very good.
Nice.
Yeah.
A couple of acknowledgements. This fic was made possible by people in discussions at the Black Prince server. Specifically, Francis Sinbin drew some art, and we had this awesome, he was doing a live stream of drawing the art while I was writing.
Nice.
Yeah, that was pretty rad. And I managed to get a very well-read snack shipper to help me with this as the beta reader, because this was my first snack fic ever. And I had a good time with that and got a lot of help from other people in the fandom, which is one of the things I love about this fandom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I love Snape being in control.
Yes. Yep. I write Snape pretty much every which way, but this was going very hard in the control direction. Cold, calculating, knows exactly what he wants and is going to get it. And Sirius just wanting to get ravaged in the dungeons.
Yeah.
That was my very first Sirius POV, and yeah. Well, thank you for listening. That was awesome.
Thank you for reading. Well, shall we go on to the fic recs?
Yes.
Okay. We talked about Death Eaters. I do have one rec, the Death Eater Chronicles by Ovidia Lee, and 19-year-old Snape's entry to the Caligula-like coven, told through the interwoven perspectives of Bellatrix, Snape, and a few surprise cameos. This is the origin story of Snape, Bella, Lucius, Narcissa, the Lestranges, and other Death Eaters. It does not portray Snape in a very good light. He's not very sympathetic in this, but it's still very good. And then, okay, A Naughty Witch's Guide to Sexual Pleasures by Oracle Obscured. Basically, Hermione is the substitute librarian, and Snape is entertaining Lucius, and she comes and drops off some books. but hers accidentally falls open, and it's the book is a naughty witch's guide.
One thing I like about that one is that it's that threesome with Severus, Hermione, and
Yes.
Lucius, and that is a triad that I am particularly fond of.
Yeah, me too.
That ambiguous friendship of Sev and Lucius makes for an interesting basis of adding a third.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. There's also one called Snape Chat by Oracle Observer.
I saw that. I thought that was fun.
It's like, oh, yeah, this story actually came first. So I guess it's, I'm the copycat. Sorry about that. Snape works at a phone sex place and Hermione calls. And that's pretty fun. Okay. Hal?
Sure. I think I've already mentioned some of these ones that are coming up here.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I mentioned Killing Time by Larry Opie. And I briefly mentioned An Hour of Snape by Desert Sea. I don't know if the premise came across clearly when I mentioned it before, but Hermione paid for an hour alone with a Severus lookalike. At least she thinks she has. And there's also some spin-off fics from that because they use Polyjuice for this purpose. And Draco is running a business that he calls the Polyjuice Fantasy Fuck. And so the PFF has a couple spin-off fics too. You can when you go to that one, there's like related fics linked in the fic. So that is just a fun little smut fest. Also, An Hour of Snape has just the humor level is cranked all the way up. So if you're looking for something that's a little less serious and a lot more funny, An Hour of Snape is a really great one. The POV meanders a bit between Snape and Hermione, but it feels very fluid. So you get exactly their thought processes at the right moments to be just hilarious. I also wrecked Accidental Apparition. Can't a wizard get some goddamn sleep around here? By Emertentia in My Veins. This one is really a very vanilla, sweet plot what plot one shot. I know some of us here have pretty hardcore tastes in general, or that we can go pretty hardcore. But for the listeners who are looking for something that's very much just a fun vanilla smut with a nice plot what plot, this is a really good one. The summary is when Severus Snape accidentally apparates in his sleep, he suddenly wakes up in Miss Granger's bed in Gryffindor Tower. So how will he escape without detection? That is a really good one for just a quick, and it's also very funny and witty. So that's on my rec list. Then I think the next ones in the list are not my recs.
Post Tenebris Lux? Actually, I thought you did.
I'm a bad fan. I haven't read that. I mean, I've read some of it, but I got like distracted and never finished. That happens a lot with the epics, even classic epics in Snape Hermione is. Yeah. I read so many of them in 2001 that I'm looking to branch out now.
Okay.
But it keeps coming up on top lists, so I'm not sure how it landed in this list, but probably somebody's top list. I'm on a Snape Hermione server where it's consistently recommended as one of the top picks. Yeah.
Okay. And we've mentioned this before, but Weasley's Wizard Wheezes by Crying Cinderella is complete now. And determined to carry on his brother's legacy, Jared puts an advertisement in the Prophet to find a male and female test subject for a new line of adult novelty products. The two that show up might just cause him to quit the business. It's good. It's pretty much wall-to-wall sex. It's like 50 some chapters long, I think.
It's
a nice long. It's Hermione. Yeah. Yes. Snape and Hermione testing sex toys. So, and yeah, there's some really good angst in there too. So, I got to recommend that. And Crying Cinderella also started another one called London Calling, where Hermione breaks her wand and leaves the magical world behind. 10 years later, she is at a bar and the band comes through and there's a guy with dark hair and sunglasses and what looks like a Death Eater tattoo. And it goes on from there. It's already had a really spicy scene. So I have to recommend that too. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Whispers of Intent by Tyrannog is a snary that Masao the dog recommends.
A really good one.
Yeah. Or Harry Potter has a life-changing encounter at a bar. Let's see, who wants to go first? Danny or Megs for some?
Yeah, I can go. Some snary ones would be Warm by Perverse Idol. Severus still suffers the after effects of Nagini's venom, especially in winter. Harry knows just how to warm him up.
Oh, I remember that one.
That one's nice. Like a Virgin by Sibylle, which is Sibylle 2013 on AO3. Harry has reservations about the fancy dress costume that he and his new lover has chosen for him. So that one's got some like costume type stuff, and it's pretty fun. I mentioned A Trick of the Mind by Pina Naponi earlier. Ever since the Horcrux in his head is gone, legitimacy comes easy to Harry. It's nearly laughable how easy it is, considering how much he used to struggle with it back in his 5th year. But he reckons half of that had been Snape's fault anyway. Who on earth would enjoy the nasty git invading their mind? But as life as Harry has known it changes, Harry's opinion on the matter changes with it. Rather drastically so, if he's being perfectly honest. Then Made to Be Broken by The Shop is Local. For all Severus is softer, warmer with Harry than he is otherwise, he's still a prickly bugger and notably maladjusted, with strange, almost inexplicable habits that Harry is only now beginning to truly understand. Then for some non-snary stuff, there's a Snape and Slughorn called Yon Snape by Svartalfer. Slughorn pursues Snape, an account of the burgeoning relationship between two Slytherins, on the background of the events of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. There's a Snape Filch called Intruder by Delphi. Peter Pettigrew breaks into Filch's rooms to retrieve James's confiscated invisibility cloak and ends up seeing something that he shouldn't. Then a Snoopin, which is The Scent of Honey by Sweet Almond. Lupin follows his nose to trouble. So there's a handful of things for you.
Nice.
Sounds good.
So for mine, I tried to do a couple different ships. So of course, I had already brought up earlier, Obscene by Danny by danpuff. Never has Severus been so wet outside of heat. It's humiliating. Obscene. It is obscene. It is wonderful. It's a one shot, an easy read. You're going to need some water. It's fantastic. My next one is, it's actually a Severus James. It's 120K, so it is a long fic. There's technically some James Lily. A teenage Snape plots his revenge on James Potter for making his life hell, but little does he know that James has plans of his own that will send both of their lives spiraling irrevocably out of control. So with this one, the reason why I wrecked it for this is, I mean, it's definitely they're both hoping to try and, prank each other to Sirius, like literally bets James that he can't, buy whatever winter ball or something that he can get Severus to say that he loves James. And they do like an unbreakable vow, which is like so extreme. So of course his life is on the line to make Severus fall in love with him. And of course he does, but things go bad when Severus learns the truth. So then that's what triggers him deciding to actually go join the Death Eaters, because he was thinking not, because he was falling for James. And then so then it like jumps forward into the future when James marries Lily. They have Harry, and then, but James the whole time has never forgotten Severus. And so then them coming together is them slowly either kind of forgiving one another or whatnot, but it has a combination of obviously them working out their stuff, but then a part of it is once they are finally together, James has to be okay with the fact that Severus is still a spy, and part of being a spy is pretty much being on the beck and call of Lucius Malfoy. So we have the aspect of like seeing a romance bloom, the dark parts of Severus being, a Death Eater and what that means. And then James has to just accept it and be okay with it for the time being before a happily ever after can finally happen. So it has a lot of those different tropes as far as like Snape and Sex to experience hate sex, having to do what he needs to do to be a spy, as well as, finding that happily ever after at the end. So It's a long one. It can be really hard to get through because it's super angsty. It'll break your heart, but it won't mend it. So I definitely highly recommend that one. My last one is definitely in the dead dovey territory, but it is one of the, I came across it a long time ago when I first started reading fanfic, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I read this, but I love it. So it's Severus, after the war, Severus Snape pulls Sirius back from the Veil, but now Sirius owes Severus, and Severus is ready to collect. So ultimately, content warning, there's some animagus form sex with Sirius as Padfoot. It's definitely just porn. Severus has Sirius pay with his body, obviously, but then slowly catches feelings for Sirius, and they, I guess, confess, and then it's a hopeful ending, but it's good, but it's definitely, it's a certain flavor that you have to be ready for, but I love it. So that's my last one for this.
Nice. That's an aspect of that ship that we didn't really talk about, that there is an animagus form there, and I know I've read more than one snack fic that has some hot man dog action. Yep. It's actually shockingly good, especially when they manage to go into Sirius's head and that difference when he's a dog and how his thoughts are different.
Yes, I like that too.
And I've seen a couple times where Snape actually notes that difference with legitimacy, and it's really, really interesting dynamic. So I'm glad you put that one on that list. I'm like, I know I've read that one.
Let's see. Heated Acts by Starry Sky Fantasy 19 is Snape, Harry, Lucius, and Draco. Quadrangle, or whatever they call it, quartet. A unique sexual bond and relationship between Draco, Lucius, Harry, and Severus and their everyday life.
It's been a long time. I don't remember much about it, but I definitely read it, and it's wonderful.
Oh, good.
Mark for later.
Yeah, definitely a super long PWP. I think it's definitely an example of how you can make 80,000 words porn. So I think
this definitely reminds me of another one that I will be recommending for the BDSM episode, because the quartet. That's pretty good stuff.
Yes, I read that too. And then the last one is The Secret Language of Plants. That is almost the last one. Okay. The Secret Language of Plants by Adrena. And Hal, did you read this? Or
I didn't wreck that one.
You didn't?
No.
Anybody else wreck it?
No.
No. It's Snoopin', Eventual Harry, Snary.
I think I started reading it, but again, it's one of those epics. It's 373,000 words, and I don't have the stamina for fics of that length anymore.
There's so much reading to do. I know what you mean. Well, sex is not the main focus, but it deals with a sexually experienced Severus who is simultaneously not used to emotional closeness, which seems to be one headcanon that spans various ships. And oh yes, that's true about Snape is him. I guess I'm going back to what we talked about earlier about, Snape learning how to be with a person and just, having emotional closeness. Anyway, yeah. Okay. And then we got a little bit of art to rec.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I put this fun one on here. The ABCs of Severus Snape, Village Broom by My Witch. My Witch is very talented. You should check out all the things My Witch has done.
Yes. And I think Snape's her favorite.
But this series is great. It's really easy to digest. Because
it's coloring pages.
The whole series of coloring pages, and it is fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
So the ABCs are all different characters. So it also it appeals to the multi-shippers or the people who just want a little taste of every other ship. So A is for Augusta, and B is for Black, and I forget.
C is for Charlie.
Is it Charlie? It is Charlie. And they're all very explicit. I mean, from that title, you might have guessed. Village Broom.
Yeah.
I am particularly fond of, I think it's the Ginny one.
Yes, Jenny's like the Dom, right? Yes.
She's the dominatrix, and it's so good.
I love, what is it? I think it's L. So for Lucius Malfoy. Or no, it's not Lucius. It's Xenophilius Lovegood.
Oh.
And they're like in nature,
Yeah.
in like a waterfall and stuff. And then there's this frog that's like is making this face, and it's just, it stole the show for me. I mean, it's a beautiful piece, but then I can't remember where the frog is, but it's making a face like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening in my home sort of thing.
G is actually Gilderoy. So that is a really interesting ship that I don't think I've ever read like a long fic that was good for them. I'm totally happy to be proved wrong that there is one, because the short one shots are so tasty. But the Ginny one is down at W for Weasley.
I was gonna say it probably was Weasley. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Pet play in that one too. So tasty.
Oh,
Sev just needs to be called a good boy.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's my art rec. Definitely check that out. It's a whole 26 letter series of coloring book pages that are fantastic.
Yeah, and forgive me, artists, I didn't really search out explicit art, but
another rec for explicit art that I could give is Luna P, $9.99. She does amazing stuff. I've had the good fortune of having her do a piece of art for one of my fics, and that sent me on a big scroll through everything she's done. It's so good. I can't recommend enough just checking all of it out.
And the French press, well, we can link to her. And also Turpin Snape has Snape having shower sex. So it's pretty, well, it's explicit, but it's very, very good. We'll link to that as well.
And Tumblr and Twitter, Mr. Villain, aka Mr. Veron, is just fantastic as far as even safe for work or not safe for work stuff is absolutely great. There's a snary one actually that I wrote a fic for that it's just, oh gosh, just such amazing work.
Yes. Lou Endlin has some stuff. I had her draw a fic for my fic Loverboy at Play, and I know she's done some other not safe for work stuff too. So check out Lou Endlin. I love her.
So good.
Yes. Okay. I guess that's pretty much it. We've had a nice long discussion. So I sure appreciate everyone being here.
Yeah, this was great. Glad to be back. It's been a while.
Yeah, same. Yeah. I stepped in on that Rickmania episode and haven't been back since, but both times have been awesome. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Always love it here.
Well, I appreciate you being here. Yes, thanks, Danny and Megs.
You're welcome.
I guess we'll just say good night then. Sweet dreams.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay.
Yeah, good job, everybody.
I'll turn it off. Yeah, Reddy did great.
Yeah, let me know. I mean, it'll let me know, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, so another rec that I had is Perfect by know me. You know me. 93. It's a Severus Sirius. And then I might not have done. Okay. And then Revenge is Sweet is by Orphan Account. So it's one that was orphaned. So we don't know who. Actually, no, that's not true. I do know who wrote it because someone posted it from fanfiction.net. So I'm going to have to, let me look really quick because it's at the very end of the, so here we go. It's like blue something. So I'll have to get the link from fanfiction.net. Open link, entire work. So I'm not sure if I think they posted it with permission, but I don't know now that I think about it. I didn't see it until the very end of finishing the work. But it is still up on fanfiction.net. So if you want to read it there and comment there, you can do so. It was done. Yep, Blue Horizon 6 on fanfiction.net. So reposted and re-edited, written by Blue Horizon 6 on fanfiction.net. So it doesn't really say either way how or why it was posted, but that's who wrote that one. It's one of my favorites for sure.
Oh, good.
I think that's it.
Alrighty. Well, that should do it then.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome. Thanks for having
And
me.
let's see,
us.
we're looking at probably October 1st.
Okay.
It's September. Yeah, October.
I'll put a link to the Fuck the Faculty Fest then.
Oh, yes, do that.
Because Seb can be the student, he can be the teacher. We get, have all the fun, teacher-student stuff with Severus.
Mhm.
So,
Oh,
cool.
yeah. Okay. Well, everybody have a good day.
Thanks. You too.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And there you have it. Hope it was good for you too. Check out the additional reading page on our website at snapechatpodcast.com or snapechat.podbean.com for fic recs, links, and more. And here we must say goodbye. We wish we didn't have to, but it hasn't escaped our notice that life isn't fair. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Tumblr and Twitter, email us, or leave a voicemail. We want to hear from you. Support us on Ko-fi to help defray the costs of production. Many thanks to Nyx for her continued work on our website. Be sure to check out Care of Magical Shippers podcast. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay snarky.